it's my nerd world, and I just got done watching The Mandalorian Season 2 finale, and I'm not crying. You're crying. You're the one sobbing. I'm not sobbing. You are. Oh my gosh, what did I just watch? What did I just witness with my own two eyes? This is a spoiler podcast for The Mandalorian Season 2 finale. Holy cow, do we got a lot of ground to cover. We also have some listener feedback, and haven't done it in a while, a special after show to the show. I would encourage you to not go anywhere, and I'm not crying. You're the one that saw Luke and cried. That was you. That wasn't me.
Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
It is a Star Wars podcast. I am your host, Jon Justice. Welcome to my nerd world, and just wow. I mean, that was absolutely incredible, and I didn't think that they were going to go there. We're talking about The Mandalorian, the rescue, the season 2 finale, and I couldn't be happier. This show continues to bring me as a fan things that I didn't realize that I needed or wanted. Look, I'm a, and again, spoilers here, just letting you know. Look, I'm a Luke Skywalker fan. Who isn't? You can't be a fan of Star Wars, really, without being a fan of Luke Skywalker. And if you listen to my shows, you know that I didn't have an issue at all with the sequel trilogy. I love the sequel trilogy. Speaking of which, there's going to be a special after show to the listener feedback this week that you want to maybe stick around for. I'll let you know what it's going to be as we get a little bit further into the show and your listener feedback. But I was not a person that had any issue with what Rian Johnson wrote for The Last Jedi. I know a lot of fans did, obviously. That we've been talking about it for the past 3 years. Just celebrated the 3-year anniversary of that film, and we still can't stop talking about it. And then there was a lot of fans out there that were very upset with the way that Luke was treated. I watched The Last Jedi again this week in honor of the 3-year anniversary, and you know, I every time I watch that film, I have a new appreciation for it. And the end of that movie, we did get full Luke Skywalker. We got, you know, with his Force projection off the rock on Ahch-To as he, faced down Kylo Ren. I appreciated what they did with that. And Rian Johnson taking the story in a different direction. And that was George Lucas's idea. You know, it was J.J. Abrams that put, Luke Skywalker on that island by himself. It was George Lucas's idea to make him a hermit. And Rian Johnson did a masterful job in handling that character in The Last Jedi, in my opinion. I was not somebody that needed to see Luke Skywalker ignite the green lightsaber or to see him kicking butt in his prime. Until I watched this episode, I did not think that they were going to go there. I really didn't. I didn't think they were going to do it. And I'm usually overly optimistic about this stuff. I'm usually the one who's going out there on a limb and saying things that most likely aren't going to happen. And I didn't even go there this time because I really didn't think that they would show Luke Skywalker on screen. And they did, and it was incredible. I've actually watched the episode twice now, and I'm looking forward to watching it again. So here's what we're going to do. When I started this show, and pretty much every show that I've done, I do this because of my love of the Star Wars genre, and it is a genre. I just like to express my feelings about about this storytelling, and hopefully people enjoy it and go along for the ride and like to listen to a fan as he goes on about the stuff that he loves about Star Wars and tries not to focus on the negative. I've written some notes down working through the episode of things that I want to talk about, this being the season finale. And of course, that post-credit stinger, which almost made me cheer this morning at 4 a.m. in my office and almost woke the house up. I thought I was getting ready to head to work. We're also going to get into your listener feedback, as I mentioned, and then we have a post-show to get to as well. Before we do that, though, I want to address something, and I always do this very cautiously on the show. But there's something that I want to get off my chest real quick, and then I want to dive into what I thought was an amazing piece of filmmaking on a number of different levels. I've got a lot of thoughts about this Mandalorian Season 2 finale. Before we do that, though, indulge me for just a few minutes.
This is not going to go the way you think.
Art is subjective. Whether you're talking about movies, television shows, music, okay? Art is subjective. Not everybody is going to like the same thing, and we like things for different reasons. That being said, enough with the complaints already. I watched this episode of The Mandalorian, and I did. I cried. It was incredible to me. I didn't realize how much I wanted to see what we saw, and I'll get into that. As I got to work, and I do my notes for the show, I wrap up my work, and we're into the show, and we get to the commercial breaks, and I start popping around on Twitter. We have listeners to our Monday through Friday show, and they comment on Twitter, and so I read those, and I have a whole bunch. I have TweetDeck open, and I've got a bunch of different columns for all my different Twitter accounts, and I couldn't believe at first, but it's Twitter. Of course people are going to complain. But I couldn't believe that people were actually complaining about this episode. And again, it's subjective. You didn't like it. You had problems with it. That's you. That's not me. I just don't understand why people default to this. I saw people complaining about the fact that they brought Luke Skywalker back, and he was, this deep fake CGI that I thought they did an amazing job on. There was another actor, but I thought that they did an incredible job bringing that character to life to show us Luke in his prime post Return of the Jedi. It looked amazing, right? Could you tell that it was special effects? Well, yeah, but it's Star Wars and I don't care. He looked fantastic. I saw people, and they're still complaining about Ben Solo all of a sudden, where people were actually going off on Twitter threads. And again, if this is you, that's fine. You're allowed to do this, but I'm also allowed to mention how ridiculous I think it is. I saw people going off on threads about how frustrated they were that the Skywalker name, Luke Skywalker family, would go out of his way. Luke would go out of his way to save Grogu, but they weren't going out of their way to save the future older Ben Solo who becomes Kylo Ren. I actually saw people complaining about that. I saw people complaining that, there's retconning going on, and, what is Grogu's fate going to be? We know what happens to the Jedi Temple and what Kylo Ren does, and what does this mean? Why is he going off with Luke? And we are really early in this timeline. Luke has not started his Jedi Temple yet in the timeline that we're at right now in The Mandalorian when we just saw Luke in this episode. Ben Solo is only 4 or 5 years old. There's a lot of time between now and when Luke starts training Ben, and I have my own theories on what's going to end up happening with Grogu. I don't believe, and this is what people were getting upset about. They were thinking, well, does that mean that Grogu was killed as part of the Jedi training, and that Kylo Ren kills him? And that's most people what happened, right? Well, no, because there's like another 20 years before we get to that spot, and a lot of things can happen with Grogu. I happen to think he's going to end up back with the Mandalorian. I'll explain that later on. But just enough already. I don't get it. I just don't get it. And it's fine. Everybody can, they can do them how they want to do them. That's cool. We're getting such great, amazing Star Wars content. Stuff that I never imagined I'd see. And it is a bummer when I see people that just immediately default to, that's how it sounds in my head. All right. I have, I've cleansed myself. Let's talk some positivity, shall we?
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
Bold, brave, and thrilling. This episode was an amazing combination of cinematic storytelling and live-action storytelling in all the elements that we got in this 45-minute episode. I don't want to say yet that it's my favorite episode yet, but man, it's close with everything that it gave us. I mean, it gave us enough action moments and storytelling that you could have easily fleshed this out to a 2-hour cinematic film, and it would have been incredible. And I actually I saw somebody else, and I think it was Space Shipper, if I'm not mistaken, on Twitter had mentioned this. He had made a similar comment. Used to be Spaceship Porn. He goes by Space Shipper now, and I subscribe and have notifications turned on because he's always tweeting about spaceships, and I love that. Those are the kind of notifications I like getting. Political ones, not so much. But he had made a comment that this episode was a really, really good sort of mashup of those two, of your cinematic storytelling and your TV storytelling. And the fact that they decided and agreed to go and do what they did in bringing Luke Skywalker in at the end of this iconic character, the centerpiece of the Star Wars universe, the kid from Tatooine who just wanted to go to Tashi Station to pick up some power converters that launched the fandom of millions upon millions of people, that they were brave enough and bold enough to go and do it, I just thought was amazing. Because as a fan, that's what I want. I don't get into this, the universe is too small. I don't buy into that. We have these characters. We have this rich universe. I love getting new characters. But man, if you got an opportunity because the timelines match up, then yeah, give me Luke Skywalker. There's no reason why he wouldn't play into this. And it makes the most sense. If you're going to set up a story like this and you're going to hand Grogu off to anybody, in hindsight, like Luke Skywalker's the only one. Like, he's the best choice. I know people were theorizing that it could be Mace Windu surviving the fall from Revenge of the Sith. People were theorizing that it could be Ezra, which I never grabbed onto simply because I believe that's another story to be told in the Ahsoka series. Here is this little, child, Yoda species, whose name is Grogu, who we've all fallen in love with over the course of the past 2 years, this amazing addition to Star Wars canon, and he's going to be separated now from the Mandalorian, and who's the best person to go and do that? Who's the person you can trust the most, and it's going to have the most impact? It's Luke Skywalker. It's Luke flipping Skywalker showing up with R2-D2 to boot! And that amazing moment at the end of the episode where the three of them, and it's staged just perfect, of prime Luke Skywalker. Like we saw him in Return of the Jedi with R2-D2 at his side holding, Grogu. I mean, if that isn't the stuff for artists to go and create or to get a poster of, I don't know what is. And we're getting a character poster of Luke Skywalker, and it's going to be so rad. So before I get into my impressions of the episode and pointing out some specific details that I personally really loved, I want to take just a moment and pay respect to the individual, to the actor who played the iconic Boba Fett in Star Wars in the original trilogy. From PJ Media, Jeremy Bulloch, the first actor to play the iconic character, has died at age 75. He passed away on Thursday. Now, Bulloch had played many roles on screen, but he said the role of Boba Fett changed the entire direction of my life in such a wonderful way. Boba Fett, the original Mandalorian bounty hunter in Star Wars, of course, plays a large role in the hit TV show The Mandalorian, where actor Tamira Morrison has taken on the role from Bulloch. He was also in Revenge of the Sith, played the pilot of the Corvette as they arrived back on Coruscant at the end of that film. The family said, and his website announced, that Jeremy died peacefully on the 17th of December 2020 following health complications, including several years of living with Parkinson's disease. In addition to the Boba Fett role, Bullock was best known for his roles in the James Bond film Octopussy in 1983 and the television series Newcomers, Doctor Who, Agony, and Robin of Sherwood. Away from screen, Bullock played soccer and cricket. He also supported a number of charities, including the Great Ormond Street Hospital, which saved his granddaughter's life. Always beloved by the fandom, and for good reason. Every single photo I've ever seen of Jeremy Bullock, he always had a smile on his face, and he was one of those actors at an early age that I became familiar with, just because that character of Boba Fett from The Empire Strikes Back, when it originally came out, was so iconic, even before the movie came out. Being in the Christmas special, the cartoon version, and of course the storied history of the action figure and the firing rocket with the choking hazard, and then the mail-in giveaway where you could get this mysterious-looking new cool character from The Empire Strikes Back, the sequel to the most popular film of all time at the time, before the movie came out, right? And Jeremy Bullock, finding out who the actor was that was behind the helmet, I became familiar with him very early on. So may he rest in peace, and prayers go out to he and his family.
My nerd world.
All right, let's get back into the season finale for the Mandalorian, opening up with that space battle. And look, the Star Wars fan in me has always had a minor little nitpick, and it got saved in this episode, and I was so giddy. And it's so stupid, and it's so ridiculous, and I know that it sounds like that, but it was just one little thing that always bugged me. So, when Attack of the Clones came out, and we got that amazing space battle between Obi-Wan Kenobi and his Jedi starfighter above Geonosis in the asteroid field, and Jango and Boba Fett, it always drove me a little bit crazy that they didn't use the main guns on the lower part of the nose on the front of the ship. So, of course, the ship has that iconic design. For those that don't know, it was originally designed off a street lamp. You'll never look at street lamps the same after you know that. There's a very specific street lamp that still is used today that looks like Slave One, and that's what it was originally designed off of. So the main guns on the front of the ship, now they used them, Boba Fett used them, the young Boba Fett used them, before they took off in the rain battle on Kamino, right, in Attack of the Clones. Man, I love that movie. But when Boba Fett was chasing Obi-Wan Kenobi down, he used a pair of separate guns that were closer up on the front of the fuselage to the cockpit. And it always drove me a little nuts because I'm like, you're not using the main guns. And I think it was more for perhaps filming reasons. Maybe I hadn't looked at the, at the ship encyclopedia, right? The dissections they do to know that there was another pair of guns there when I saw it. But I always wanted to see those guns in action, and we got those guns, the main guns in action in this episode when they're tracking down the shuttle Tidarian. Seeing those two pilots in the shuttle, seeing the blue, there's in the backdrop, in the background of the cockpit of the flight deck on the Imperial shuttle, they look like it looks like the symbol for Wi-Fi, with the strokes and the concave lines that get higher. Those are iconic to me. There's a photo of the main heroes from the original trilogy taken from Return of the Jedi when they get on the stolen shuttle, Imperial shuttle, to go to Endor. And there's that cockpit. There's that shot looking into the cockpit of Luke, Han, Leia, and Chewbacca getting on board. And you can see that design lit up in the background. So seeing that again just immediately took me back to Return of the Jedi. That whole opening, cold open, with Cara Dune taking out that Imperial who was holding the Doctor hostage. I mean, just a fantastic opening. Anytime you're getting Slave One in action is amazing. We then fly to this planet, which I don't, at least at the time of this recording, I have not gotten confirmation on what planet it was. Obviously, they have a Mandalorian ship outside, which was rad, because that's Bo-Katan's ship, and I love that ship. So now you got the Mandalorian ship, You got Slave One and you got the Imperial shuttle all sitting there in one shot. I'm already losing my mind, and we haven't even gotten into the episode. We get an amazing little fight taking advantage of Sasha Banks' wrestling background. As a matter of fact, that was almost, I believe that was put in there to do just that, to take advantage of Sasha Banks and her being a wrestler, getting up in Boba Fett's face and seeing those two individuals fighting. Just fantastic. We get the setup, which I thought was pure Star Wars, right? When they convince Bo-Katan to go with them, mentioning the Darksaber and how they're going to go after Moff Gideon and get Grogu back. And then we get that setup on the flight deck, all right, where they have Moff Gideon's cruiser and they lay out the plan. I mean, pure Star Wars to a T. I mean, just, that is having a holograph, laying out what you're going to do, and looking at the holograph. I mean, that's just, it doesn't get much more Star Wars than that. Then we get to the fake space fight. The exchanges and the dialogue. Peyton Reed who decorated Ant-Man, and the other episode where they crash land on the snow planet, right? With the big spiders, which also had an amazing 2 X-Wings versus the Razor Crest. May it rest in peace. But we get the fake space fight leading on to Moff Gideon's cruiser. The launching of the TIE fighters was incredible. I love seeing the intricacies and a little bit more background on how that actually happens. Seeing the pilots move inside the cockpit as they launch out the nose of Moff Gideon's cruiser, and then they crash the shuttle, into the hangar bay. Again, this was a movie, but it was only 45 minutes long. Just absolutely fantastic stuff. And we get into the rescue of Grogu. And again, pure Star Wars, right? Getting onto a ship and trying to get back something that's precious to you. The Dark Troopers, the girl power as they go and move their way towards the flight deck, while the Mandalorian has to go and rescue Grogu and ends up dealing with the Dark Troopers, who were absolutely lethal. Reminded me of Terminator, how these are not to be messed with. Watching it a second time with my boys was fun, and it's always a good time. But watching it with my boys is fun because I like to see how they react. Are they getting into it, right? I'm the Uber fan. I'm the Star Wars apologist. I love all this stuff. The boys aren't like that. The boys may be a little bit more open and honest about something that they don't care for, whereas I usually give it an excuse. But they were into it. They were definitely sold on how lethal those Dark Troopers were. Then we get into this amazing fight that if you told me this was going to happen, I probably would have been like, okay. But seeing it play out, I would have been wrong to have passed it off. And I'm talking about the Moff Gideon versus Mando fight and the payoff of the Beskar spear. This show has done, and Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have done such a great job of just laying out how, the progression of these stories and the things that happen in other episodes, foreshadowing what's going to happen later and paying off later on. And I know most shows do this, don't misunderstand. But it just seems like they've done a really, really good job. The growth of the Mandalorian, his relationship with Grogu this whole time through both seasons. The episode with Ahsoka where she gets that spear, finds out most likely where Thrawn is, and at the same time passes that Beskar spear over to the Mandalorian, completely pays off in this wicked Mando Beskar spear versus Moff Gideon and the Darksaber fight that I never knew that I wanted, but now I'm so glad that I got, and I can't wait to watch it over and over and over again. And then you get to Mando taking down Moff Gideon, not killing him, bringing him back to the bridge, and the reveal to the audience that wasn't aware of the mythology of the Mandalorian and the Darksaber that it's pretty significant that the Mandalorian has now stripped Moff Gideon of this. The fact that he respects this, right? So one has to assume that Moff Gideon must have fought somebody else to get the Darksaber, because he definitely seemed to have a reverence for the mythology and the lore of the Mandalorian where he respected it too. At least that was the impression that I got. And his laying out, much like Emperor Palpatine in the original trilogy goading on, Vader or goading on Luke. He's sitting there explaining to the Mandalorian how, no, you cannot just give it to Bo-Katan. You might as well kill him right now because she cannot just take it. You have to fight him for it. He's like, I surrender. Here you go. And it's like, nah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way, which is obviously going to be a setup going into season 3. This is going to be an issue that we're going to have to deal with of, is the Mandalorian going to fight Bo-Katan to get the Darksaber? And what is Bo-Katan going to do to spur that on? Or is it going to be a situation where circumstances bring about where she ends up ticked off at him or he ends up ticked off at her to the point where they have to duke it out and she has to get it, right? And I dig that. I love the fact that we're getting this mythology. And I want to take this moment, too, before we get further into it and I talk about Luke, that I really do think that based off of the way the episode ended with Grogu going off with Luke at the end, right? They did a good job, at least for me as a fan, giving us one episode prior to this one and taking Grogu out of the scenario, right? And they kind of did that with the episode before when he was actually taken, although he's still in it, but giving us an episode without Grogu so that we know what that's going to feel like. Because this is going to be, I think, difficult for a lot of fans because the popularity of this show was in part because of the popularity of Grogu. And so their ending to season 2 would obviously lead you to believe that going into season 3, he's not going to be a part of the equation. But I know for me as a fan, knowing that, all right, we've got a whole host of other issues here. They've got Moff Gideon as a prisoner. They've got the issue of the Darksaber. You've got Bo-Katan who wants the Darksaber back because she wants to go and free Mandalore, but she can't do it without it. So obviously heading into season 3, this is going to be a part of the storyline. I dig that, and I don't need Grogu for that, even though I do believe that eventually Grogu is going to return, and I'll get to that here in just a moment. Then we get to the arrival of Luke Skywalker. Now, I ended up inadvertently spoiling this for myself. I was watching this morning before work, as I do every Friday when Mando's on, and got my work done early. It had enough time, and I kept watching the clock. I looked at the, I paused the show when it started to see what the length of the episode was, and seeing that I made sure that I had enough time so I get to work at the time when I wanted to get there, and I was totally fine. But as I'm watching the episode unfold, and I'm just getting absorbed into it, even watching it on my Mac desktop here. It's a decent sized screen, but it's not my big screen. But I was better off watching it, and I'm better off watching these than going to work and not watching them and getting spoiled because I'm on Twitter all morning long. But I had paused the episode at one point to see how long we had until the episode was over, and I inadvertently clicked my mouse to the right, which sped up, which fast forwarded, and you get that little tiny screenshot in the drag when you drag the bar over to advance forward in the episode, and it gives you a little screenshot of what happens in that moment of where you stopped. And I just saw the green lightsaber, and I knew. Now, it was kind of fun because I didn't know how it was going to happen. I just saw a green lightsaber and assumed that had to be Luke, and I didn't think that they were going to do Luke. So it was sort of a happy accident because getting to the end with all the dark troopers there standing at the door, pounding their way in, knowing there was no way that this group of individuals was going to be able to take on all these dark troopers, I knew in the back of my head, well, I'm pretty sure Luke's showing up, I just don't know how. And then the X-Wing shows up. And then we get Luke just marching his way, shredding these dark troopers every step of the way. I mean, it was brilliant. The way they handled it was absolutely brilliant. I was completely and 100% sold every single step of the way as Luke made his way to the flight deck of Moff Gideon's cruiser. I saw people complaining about this, man, and I'm sorry that it bugged you. I thought it was great. The moment that Luke Skywalker arrives in the elevator, right, which, by the way, looked just like the one from Return of the Jedi. At least that's what my mental memory told me. And he plows through that, 2 dozen of the dark troopers standing outside the door to the flight deck. And the way that it was shot was very reminiscent of Darth Vader's attack on the Rebels at the very end of Rogue One. And I dug that. Even his moves were very similar. I mean, that's a scene that I'm going to be watching over and over and over again. And that's what I was talking about before. That was something that I never knew that I wanted. And now I got it, and I'm so happy that I did. I've always been one to go, I got my Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy, right? I got my old school original trilogy Luke. I did the same thing with Han Solo and with Princess Leia. I got all of them in the original trilogy. I didn't need any of them in the sequel trilogy. And if you had asked me, would you like to see Luke ignite the green again and use it? I'd be like, yeah, that'd be cool, but it wouldn't be something that I would have been excited about. And then I saw it, and I just was crying. It took me back to when I was a little kid, watching Luke Skywalker battle his father on the Death Star 2 at the end of Return of the Jedi. And they did just a masterful job. And the tears really started to flow when you actually get the reveal of Luke Skywalker, and they did an incredible job. Look, the uncanny valley. The uncanny valley is when you're looking and you're going, hey, that's not real. But, I mean, it was darn close, man. And it doesn't matter. It's Star Wars. I was completely sold. Completely sold. Even on a second time around. And again, using my family as a gauge, my wife is going to be Melinda is going to be the most critical, right? She's going to end up being the most critical of anybody in the household. And even she was like, they did a really good job with him. And then to have R2-D2 show up and to have this wordless exchange between the little squeaks of Grogu and R2-D2's beeps and his excitement, it made me feel as if Grogu was seeing an old friend, like he'd seen R2-D2 before. Now, we don't know, obviously, who rescued Grogu from the Jedi Temple, and I'm sure that will be revealed at some point in the future. But this, of course, leads to the Mandalorian and Grogu having to say goodbye to each other. And Luke saying that, hey, like Mandalorian says, well, he doesn't want to go with you. And Luke says, no, he needs your permission. He needs your permission to go with me. And then the Mandalorian removing his helmet to let Grogu see his face for the first time. Just an incredibly touching and perfect finale for these two characters, for the lone wolf and cub. And like I said earlier, who better and who more trusting to take Grogu from the Mandalorian than Luke Skywalker? Right? That really was, I hadn't thought about that when I was speculating on what Jedi would show up, because you knew a Jedi was going to show up. I never stopped to consider that the Jedi better have some meaning. Like if that's Ezra, I don't think that from Rebels, for those that don't know, right, a Jedi in training, who went missing at the end of the run of Rebels, which is most likely what the Ahsoka show will be about. If that had been Ezra, it would have been great for fans of Rebels, but it also wouldn't have been impactful enough for a general audience to watch it and go, oh, okay, I get that. They'd be like, who's that guy? Who's the one person that you can take Grogu away from the Mandalorian? And it really just comes down to Luke Skywalker, because Obi-Wan Kenobi's dead at this point in time. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not worried about what the Grogu's fate. My expectation moving forward is that whenever they wrap up the Mandalorian, that Grogu will have gone through training to where he's more self-sufficient, and he will get joined back up with the Mandalorian at some point in time after he's finished his training. That character is too important now to Star Wars and to Disney, more specifically. They'll be doing big things with Grogu in the future. Eventually he's going to talk, right? Wait until we get that moment. Holy cow. And how do you do his... Well, we'll get to that when we get to it, right? But Grogu's going to talk. Think about that for just a moment, right? One day, Grogu is going to speak. And what in the world is going to happen then? That's the thing that fixes the world, right? The pandemic ruined the world. It'll be Grogu speaking the first time that will save the world, right? Just an incredibly touching moment. One of the best moments, Look, the last two, the season finale, this is my favorite episode. I'm coming to that conclusion. Because my favorite episode leading up to this one was the season 1 finale, Redemption, that Taika Waititi directed. this episode has gone beyond that. That is still my favorite Mandalorian episode, but this final episode of Season 2 was a lot more than just a Mandalorian Season 2 episode, right? It really did kick open the door for a lot of different things. You know, what's going to happen with Grogu and Luke? I want to know about that. What's going to happen with the Darksaber and Moff Gideon? And then we get to the post-credit stinger, and we return to Jabba's palace. I thought it was amazing that we returned to Jabba's palace to see Bib Fortuna, who obviously had eaten too many of Jabba's frogs and was looking more Jabba than he was Bib Fortuna. I thought that was cool. Apparently, you don't have much to do on Tatooine but eat fatty foods. Right, because it hadn't been that long. It'd only been like 7 years. So he really... Anyway, you get Fennec, and Fennec's just a rad character. She's going to be doing the voice in the Bad Batch for the same character. So glad she's sticking around. Ming-Na Wen is an amazing actress, huge Star Wars fan, and I love her character. And then to have Boba Fett come in, Bib Fortuna kind of, hey, you know, you're alive, ooh, McClunky. Did you catch that? He said McClunky. And then kill him, and then take the throne, only to get the book of Boba Fett coming December of 2021. I almost cheered. I threw my arms up. I was so excited. It raises some questions about when The Mandalorian is going to air, because they said The Mandalorian wasn't going to air until Christmas of 2021. So are we going to get a short, Book of Boba series, a short run series leading into that season opener of season 3 for The Mandalorian? I know that's causing a little bit of confusion within the fandom, but it was incredible, and I love Star Wars, and it's so inspiring. Right, I'm in the process of like 3 different projects right now, all relating to my EMBARK series. I'm editing the audiobook for Gon Corbin and the Asteroid of Misfortune, which can be read as a standalone adventure. It is based off an event that takes place from book 3, but it can be read as a standalone adventure. And I'm editing the audiobook for that. I'm editing the first draft of book 5, and at the same time I'm writing book 6. And seeing this Star Wars content is just so completely and utter and completely inspiring. It inspires me to write, and to write better. That's what I love. That's what I love about it. And I'm so thankful that we have this. And you know what? Hat tip to Disney. The people that think that Disney wrecked Star Wars, I don't get it. It's cool. That's your opinion. That's great. But I think that they've been doing a fantastic job with Star Wars. And, as we laid out in last week's episode, we're getting even more content now. We're getting a ton of content. And the fact that we're getting the Book of Boba Fett show with Fennec Shan and Boba, played by Tamira Morrison, right? And he's got a dad bod. I think that's rad. Just so exciting. As always, what do you think? Did it meet your expectations? Were you excited as I was? Were you more excited? What did it mean for you to see Luke ignite the green? It's just, makes me want to go watch Return of the Jedi, and that's not something that it's not usually high on my list of Star Wars movies that I want to go watch, but now I want to go watch Return of the Jedi, and I may end up doing that tonight. But I want to know what you think. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. And I want to take a moment, too. I mentioned book 4 in my EMBARK series, and we're going to get to listener feedback here. But book 4 in my EMBARK series is available for pre-order right now at Amazon.com. So if you want to get your pre-order in, you can go do that right now at Amazon.com. The paperback is not up for pre-order yet. I'm waiting for the final cover from my cover artist. I gave him the book blurb, so I need the cover that has the book blurb on it, and I don't have it yet. As soon as I do, that will be posted as well. And I am editing the audiobook. I don't know if the audiobook is going to be ready for its official January 12th release date, but I'm working as hard as I can to get it submitted as soon as possible. It's completely recorded. I just have to finish the editing. This book is shorter, by the way. It's just a little short of 60,000 words. So much shorter than the other shortest book, which was Treasure in Darkness Book 2, which was 90,000. It's just a fun little comedy space adventure romp of and a story of Gon Corbin and his sarcastic rectangle-shaped AI robot Alex, and they get stuck on an asteroid, and it's a lot of fun. And I had a blast recording the audiobook. I had a blast writing it, and I can't wait to get it out there. So if you want to go and pre-order it, go to Amazon.com right now and search for Jon, Jon Justice. All right. We got emails to get to. Let's go ahead and dive into some listener feedback this week.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
All right, first off, friend of the show, JW, writes, there absolutely has to be Force Skypes or flashbacks if Hayden Christensen is in the Obi-Wan show. But there is so much story to be told between the two of them during the 20-year span that it cannot and should not be limited to a series. That's the disappointing part of it. That's one of those things where I wait to see what they're going to do. This was originally supposed to be a movie, right? And we know it takes place 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. So, I'm always willing to wait to see what they're going to give us before I personally jump to a conclusion of, did we need more than just that? We didn't get to see the behind the scenes footage that was shown for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series during the investors call last week. But we do know now from sources that did get to see it that Ewan McGregor made a comment that this was going to be a rollicking adventure. And as I mentioned last week, that he was happy to see, to be able to work with Hayden Christensen again. So it'll be really, I'm looking forward to it. There's some shows that I look forward to more than others, but if this last episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian proved anything, when it comes to what they're creating Star Wars wise, they're offering up things that I never knew that I wanted. And that's what's so cool about it. I like that more than going, this is what I would have done, or this is what I wanted. I'm kind of just open. Just give it to me, and I'll let you know what I think. Right? Frog Lady. I never knew I needed to see Frog Lady, jumping on all fours on that snow planet, getting chased by giant space spiders. But I did, and it was rad. Thank you for the email, JW. All right, friend of the show, Ben Fisher, says this. Great job on the latest podcast, breaking down all the new content coming out. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. He says, I reference this link quite a bit when I'm interested in catching up on a Star Wars book or forget where something happens in the timeline. It's the simple Star Wars book list timeline of Star Wars novels. Yoda's datapad.com. The last update I saw was from November 22nd, and I'm thinking a new update will come soon after all the new content was released. I find it interesting, Ben goes on to say, the Taika Waititi movie, if true, will be on the Dawn of the Jedi Into the Void. Now, we covered that last week. There was a lot of speculation that this story, Dawn of the Jedi, which was a novel, also a comic book series, might be a part of the source material for Taika Waititi's movie based off some of the concept art that we saw. Since that book is not considered canon that I'm aware of, no, it's not, it will be the start of bringing what is considered non-canon into canon. Let me stop here. I don't think that's going to be the case. My expectation is that if they do something based off Dawn of the Jedi, they will cherry pick what it is that they want to grab. And that's what they've been doing, right? Thrawn wasn't canon until they brought him back in via Rebels, and even then they went and they shifted the timeline of when he existed versus what was in Legends. So my expectation will be that if it will be based off Dawn of the Jedi, it's not going to be a 1-to-1 comparison, but more of a, hey, here are some elements that you can play with in this particular pre-High Republic timeline. Right? So this wouldn't necessarily be the bringing in of Dawn of the Jedi into the Void, into the canon, but more taking elements from it and making that canon. His movie, Ben goes on to say, is probably the one thing that I'm looking forward to the most. I know you have mentioned that Thor Ragnarok is one of your favorite Marvel movies. Yes, and it is the same for me and my kids. Whenever it is one of our birthdays, we have to say, it's my birthday in the Grand Master's voice. I didn't do it as good as the Grand Master, but it's my birthday. Right? I was pretty close. Wasn't too bad. I also just love the soundtrack to that movie. Yes. I will be curious if Taika will stick with the typical Star Wars soundtrack or go with his own style using something more mainstream, a mix of classic pop similar to Thor Ragnarok. I could see Taika Waititi doing something like, and I know this sounds off the wall, But I can see Taika Waititi doing something where it's Star Wars music, but it sounds more 70s. Not because we had 70s music in Star Wars, but because it came out in the 70s, and that's the vibe of it. But Taika Waititi is just talented, man. And I just look at that last episode of season 1 and what he did with that, and the balancing act that he did between the ridiculous, the humor and the excitement and the seriousness of you need to strike that balance. Star Wars has always been funny. Not all the jokes land, George. Dad jokes. No. Didn't work so well. But Star Wars has always had an element of humor in it. I think there are moments in The Rise of Skywalker that I think are incredibly funny, some of those exchanges. I've never seen so few wayfinders, right? I told you not to tell me what buried these things. We're poking around in tunnels. We're going to die here in a tunnel, and we're all keeping secrets. The whole Spice Runner thing. Star Wars has always had humor in it, and Taika Waititi does a really good job balancing that type of humor, that humor out when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. Ben goes on to say, I'm looking forward to the last episode of The Mandalorian. I have a weird feeling we will be left with more questions than answers at the end of it. Yeah, you're probably right on that front. Thank you, as always, a friend of the show, Ben. I appreciate it. All right, Tony J. Huge friend of the show. Huge friend of the show. Love me some Tony J. And I appreciate him writing in. Thanks for talking about all the new Star Wars content. I'm not entirely sure which thing I'm looking forward to the most, but it's probably the Kenobi series or the Rogue One movie. Which, by the way, Patty Jenkins did an interview with Collider and said they were pretty far along with the script. Would not tell us who's writing the script, but said that they were pretty far along with it. And she mentioned how she hopes that she can pave the way for other individuals, and the way that she phrased that made it sound like to me that she was establishing a movie that can be built upon for other films. And I know there's no way to know that based off the limited knowledge that we have of Rogue Squadron, except for the fact that it comes out December 2023, and it's going to be about fighter pilots, probably based after The Rise of Skywalker. But I got the sense in her comment that she meant that this movie would serve as a foundation for future Star Wars stories, which has me really excited, because that's a timeline that I definitely want us to continue to play in and move forward on. The Ahsoka series, Tony goes on to say, definitely will be worth watching. Hopefully we'll get to see both Ezra and Thrawn. I think you're right that they will have a crossover between Mandalorian and Ahsoka. Yeah, and they actually said that. I mean, that wasn't something that was speculation either, Tony. That was something that they actually specifically said. Kathleen Kennedy came out and said that all these shows, so the Book of Boba Fett we know now, but Ahsoka and Rangers of the New Republic. And we're also hearing from some individuals who are in the know on Twitter that there may be some other shows mixed in. But we know that Rangers, Ahsoka, and Boba are all going to intertwine with The Mandalorian, leading to one big movie or one big event. Whether or not it's a movie, we don't know, for live action or not on Disney+. He goes on to say, the Kenobi series will probably have flashbacks, as you suggested, but it could possibly go back to the Clone Wars era or during Revenge of the Sith, since both actors have aged well. For a present-time story arc, maybe they'll show a young Luke with Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, maybe something with the Hutts or a number of other aliens present on Tatooine. Maybe Obi-Wan leaves to go check up on Leia on Alderaan. There are so many possibilities. For the Lando series, I'm hoping they have both flashbacks to when he owned the Falcon as well as present day or future stories after Solo. They could show how he acquired the Falcon in a flashback. They could also show how he became the administrator of Cloud City, and of course, they could show anything in between, including stories with Han and Chewie, which would be awesome. Yeah, and I talked about that last week, and if they move forward in the timeline from Solo with the Lando show, then you don't get Lando in the Falcon, but... And I may have mentioned it last week, but if I didn't, but we would get Lando with a new ship. And a new ship from Lando is a pretty rad idea, too. So I kind of dig that. Tony wraps up saying, in the short term, I'm looking forward to your new books. Thank you very much. Especially the audio of Book 4. I'm actually staring at it on my desktop. As well as the WandaVision series. Both come in January. That's right. Take care and may the Force be with you. Thank you, Tony. I really do appreciate it, man. Really do. And I appreciate all the retweets you always give me, too. By the way, if you want to follow me on Twitter, at Jon, Jon Justice. Also, EMBARK Books. At My Nerd World. So at the My Nerd World. Embark Books is my Twitter handle where I just promote my science fiction stories. And then at Jon Justice is my personal account. I mostly use that one for the radio stuff, and me personally, the My Nerd World is basically podcast Star Wars related stuff and book stuff. All right, Brennan Marr from Page Turners They Were Not, also a friend of the show, says this. Hi, John. Hi, Brennan. My dad and I were discussing Anakin Skywalker the other night, and I asked my dad what he thought about Anakin being the chosen one of Jedi legend. My dad said that he didn't think it was a very interesting idea because he didn't think that there was anything special about Anakin that set him apart from any other Jedi. This got me thinking, and my dad thought this was an interesting approach. What if Anakin was the chosen one because he was the only person who could simultaneously destroy the Jedi and the Sith? I'm not talking about Order 66. I mean that with his own death, he could destroy both groups. To me, it always seemed the Jedi had gone astray from their roots based off their behavior in the prequel trilogy. The Jedi needed a reset, and the destruction of the old Jedi in favor of the new, namely Luke, as well as the destruction of the Sith, was only something Anakin could do. What do you think of this interpretation? I dig it. I can appreciate that. I like it. My take on the one has always been kind of loose. I felt with the sequel trilogy and what they were laying out with Rey was a way to say that, anytime the darkness begins to rise, like Snoke said, and as a matter of fact, I actually think that I might have the I have the other Snoke quote. I don't have that one. But the darkness rises and the light to meet it. I'd always felt that when it came to the Chosen One, it was almost like what they did in The Matrix. And that is, there's not just one Chosen One. There's a Chosen One that comes up at a moment in time when the galaxy needs something and the Force demands that somebody rises up to counter the darkness to bring about balance until it gets thrown off again. So whereas Luke would have been the Chosen One for that particular time period, Rey was the Chosen One for the next one. Now, I know that doesn't necessarily ring true. I'm just saying that's kind of how I've always looked at it. I've always kept a very loose interpretation of the mythology and of the prophecies because, as they've established in Star Wars lore, the prophecies can be misread as well. I like your idea as well and what your dad had to say. But I always envisioned that what they were doing with Disney was setting up a scenario where, okay, we can tell saga stories, and we've kind of got a mechanism to do that. When the dark side begins to rise and becomes powerful enough, again, the Force brings about a light side within an individual to counter that, to try to bring balance to those two. Now, the Rise of Skywalker, I felt did a good job of sort of bringing balance overall and ending both through the combination of the Dyad and the end of Palpatine. But of course, we know that there's always can be another bad person that could rise up down the line. So, thank you, Brandon, as always, for your thoughts and comments as well. So that wraps up this portion of the show. I want to thank you for checking the show out. As always, if you want to support My Nerd World, a Star Wars podcast, go and pick up a copy of one of my space opera books. Book 1, 2, and 3 are available now. Like I said, Book 4 is available in ebook pre-order. As soon as I get that cover, I will put up the paperback for pre-order. The release date for Gone Corbin and the Asteroid of Misfortune is January 12th. Almost said it. Oh, I was close. I almost let it out, and I don't want to edit the show. Book 5. I gave you one word, the. Book 5 in the series. Will be out in February. Book 6 should be out in March, and Book 7 should be out in April. So you better get reading. Go to Amazon.com, search for Jon, Jon Justice. You can pick up Embark Book 1, Embark Book 2, Treasure in Darkness, and Embark Book 3, The Vanishing War, in ebook, paperback, or audiobook, narrated and produced by yours truly, Jon Justice, and pre-order the Gone Corbin book. All right, so I'm going to officially wrap the show up and say thank you for listening, but we do have an after show today, so if you would like to know what it is about, I would encourage you to stick around. If not, we'll talk to you after the holidays. This is the last show for the holidays unless I decide to do one over Christmas vacation. So check your feeds, but after today's show, I think I'm going to take a break until after the new year. I think that's the plan. I tried to do this last year and I didn't. I ended up recording an episode anyways. So, this post show I'm about to do to the regular show is so that I don't do one over vacation, but you never know. Either way, the show will be back if it's not back before the end of 2020, going into 2021, which I hope is better than 2020, but I'm worried about it because that just means that next year can drink because it's 2021. All right, stick around if you want to hear the post show. If not, thank you so much for downloading it. Happy New Year. I hope you have an amazing Christmas. I hope wherever you are, you're healthy, you're happy, and you're safe. Right? I do believe that everything happens for a reason, the good stuff and the bad stuff. I really do truly believe that. And so I hope that provides some level of comfort to you, and this show does as well. But again, I hope you and your family have a fantastic Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
The Force will be with you. Always.
My nerd world.
It's an instinct. A feeling. The Force brought us together. We're not alone. Good people will fight if we lead them.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
But I do.
Long have I waited. And now, you're coming together. Is your undoing.
Confronting fear is the destiny of a Jedi. Your destiny. The Force will be with you.
Always.
My nerd world.
This Sunday marks the 1 year of the release of The Rise of Skywalker. Now, this movie has connected with me in a way that I didn't expect that it would connect to me too. I'm really wording this poorly. I love The Rise of Skywalker, and I wanted to take a moment. I was going to do a separate episode, but I decided, you know what? I'll go ahead and do it as a post show on this particular show. But I wanted to take a moment to commemorate the 1 year release of The Rise of Skywalker and just talk a little bit about this movie and share some further thoughts about this film, which is controversial for a lot of individuals, but not controversial to me in the slightest. I've loved all of the Disney movies. I love The Force Awakens. I find it totally entertaining. I do agree with some individuals who talk about how it's a bit of a combination of the original trilogy. I don't have a problem with it at all, but it is. That movie was made to establish Star Wars to a new generation and bring about the Disney era. And J.J. Abrams did a great job on it. I love Rogue One. It's not my favorite Star Wars movie, but it is an amazing film. And all of these films are rewatchable. I've gone on and on about how much I believe that the Last Jedi is a masterpiece of filmmaking and a fantastic Star Wars movie. The Rise of Skywalker for me, and I thought for a while it was just because it was the newest one, because I think there are people like that. The friend of the show and friend of mine, Ken, who does the beta reading for me for my books, I think he mentioned this, that he always kind of becomes the fan of the latest thing released, and I tend to be that way. It takes a little bit of time to gain perspective, and I wondered for a while if The Rise of Skywalker, if I liked it so much just because it was the culmination of all these films and the final story in the Skywalker saga. And as the year went on, I came to the conclusion that, no, man, I love this movie. And it is infinitely rewatchable in a way that all Star Wars movies are, but there's something different about this film for me, right? Because anybody listening can go, well, John, you watch the Star Wars movies all the time. They're all rewatchable. Yeah, they are. But, I often need some distance. Like, I could watch The Rise of Skywalker, like, every day and still be entertained by it every day. A lot of J.J. Abrams do that for me. Both of his Star Trek films are that way. J.J. Abrams just makes really entertaining films. Ones that I do not want to look away from, where every scene is interesting in some way, shape, or form. Like, the only shot in all of The Rise of Skywalker that I do a slight eye roll on is when the Knights of Ren show up on Pisana, and they're on that plateau next to their ship, and they're looking like, people made the joke in the trailer that it looked like some post-apocalyptic boy band, and that is probably the only complaint that I have about The Rise of Skywalker, is that I felt that the usage of the Knights of Ren, it doesn't take away or distract anything from the movie, and I like what happens with Ben Solo at the end of the film on Exegol. I dig that, what happens with them, but the points when they show up, they're not really a threat. That's my only complaint about the film. And my only little nitpick is that one little moment where they're standing on the plateau looking around, because I just go, what the hell are you guys looking for? And you're right out in the open. Anybody could take a shot at you if they wanted to. No, I just think this is an amazing Star Wars movie and an amazing film. It had to be a Herculean task for J.J. Abrams to have to take this over after all the controversy from The Last Jedi. I'd like to believe that it doesn't matter to these studios, but that it does. After having to take it over from Colin Trevorrow leaving the film. But I love what they did with the story. I love the relationship between Kylo Ren and Rey, between Ben and Rey. The end of the film, even though when I first watched it, I had issues with the space battle, I don't anymore, because I usually look at these films in totality to where, well, okay, I don't get extended shots in the space battle in The Rise of Skywalker, but I can get that in any number of different Star Wars content. I don't necessarily need it here. Because JJ doesn't do that with Rey and crusty, Palps tied to the machine and Ben Solo. Like, the pacing of the final face-off in the arena on Exegol with the Sith Eternal is paced perfectly, and I think that's part of the reason why JJ did what he did with the space battle. Which there are some amazing shots. I just would have liked some sort of longer establishing shots, but now I don't have an issue with it anymore. It seemed pretty clear to me that JJ wanted to focus on the attack on the Death Star, what was happening on the surface between Ben, Palps, and Rey, and have a space battle going on around them. But I want to go back to the beginning of the film and just make a couple of comments. And just sort of share a bit of my love as a tribute to this movie, because I really did personally think that they wrapped it up in a very special way. They wrapped it up neatly. It was poignant. It was relevant. It was emotional. And I thought that they handled, personally, Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, and Rey perfectly. I have no issues with the way that whole dynamic played out, even the passing of Ben Solo, even though I know a lot of people did. But starting off with the film itself, and having watched it again recently, there is a darkness and a light to this film that balances out really nicely. With the opening crawl, The Dead Speak. Seeing it in the theater for the first time, not knowing what the crawl was going to be, but having an idea of what the storyline was from reading some of the spoilers, that crawl was one of the best crawls I'd seen. And that whole line of The Dead Speak, I just thought was a stroke of brilliance. Because immediately you're like, what? I mean, it really struck a chord with me. The opening montage of Kylo Ren on Mustafar, J.J. Abrams and his quick cuts, and the focusing in on the Wayfinder as Kylo Ren makes his way through that nebula with the music and going to Exegol, and how dark and scary it was and foreboding, leading into this really killer action sequence taking place on the floating iceberg with the Millennium Falcon and the light speed skipping, right? And I know when I first saw it, I thought the pace was too kinetic and too fast, and now I just dig it because I love how we get into it. We get this darkness, we get this transition, this setup, there's a spy, and then we have the light. And then we have this fantastic opening with Rey, who's training herself, right, on Agent Kloss, and her running through the forest with the training remote and the Force connection between Kylo Ren and Rey. It was just, it was awesome, and I love. We're into it, man, and it's all so rewatchable and wholly entertaining. And then we're off on this rollicking adventure. The stuff that made up the 80s movies of when I was a kid. And even having only just recently seen, I know, scary, huh? Within the past year, Goonies for the first time, because I never saw it when I was a kid. You know, I would have attributed it more to like Raiders of the Lost Ark or those adventure stories. But it really did have this sort of 80s Goonies vibe to it. And I love that because J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio, whether they intended it or not, they embedded this MacGuffin story of this Sith dagger that puts Rey on this journey, which is very much in line with those stories that were told when we were kids, right? In the middle of this larger story of this connection between these two opposing objects and this looming threat of the Sith Eternal that Kylo Ren has found. I just thought that it was a brilliant mashup of Star Wars lore and adventure MacGuffin story and the ties that bind. And I guess in a word, it's just entertaining. The dialogue is entertaining. The action sequences are entertaining. The subtle, quieter moments are entertaining. The moments between Rey and Finn when she's discussing what she saw in her vision, when she's explaining to Finn later on that she has to go and take out Palpatine and find Exegol. Finn telling her this doesn't sound like you. The exchange between Zori Bliss, the introduction of this new character, which I know some people have come out and said that was unnecessary. I love Zori Bliss. And that quiet little moment with her and with Poe. Everybody in this film got their time. And Daisy Ridley carries the whole thing. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I love it so much. I mean, she's in like 51 minutes of screen time of the film. And Rey's portrayal, Daisy Ridley's portrayal of Rey in The Rise of Skywalker is hands down my favorite Star Wars character. I just think she does an amazing job. And that darkness and the light coming together in that midway point of the movie with this epic battle that mirrors, sort of flip-flopping the battle between Anakin and Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith, but we get this battle between Kylo Ren and Rey that ultimately brings Ben Solo back, right? On this planet in the Endor system among these crashing waves and the wreckage of the Death Star. I mean, it's amazing. It is an absolutely amazing sequence, and that midpoint culmination. There are so many moments entertaining. I mean, the whole film is, but the action sequences, the speeder chase, giving us. I mean, why do we need tread speeders? Right? We have regular speeders that can go. Why do we need? Who cares? They're rad. Why do we need them to flip up and throw off? Jetpack stormtroopers. I don't know. It's Star Wars. It's rad. The skiffs that they're riding, right? I mean, the little nods to the other films without duplicating what they did. Those skiffs reminded me of the skiffs that we got on Jabba's Palace in Return of the Jedi, except these are fast. And they're piloting them like boats. It gives us this different take on the pod race from the Phantom Menace. And then getting to that end battle and the battle that takes place between Kylo Ren and Rey, like I mentioned, on the Death Star 2. Rey's little own dark side adventure, meeting herself. I just love every aspect of this movie, and I hope one day that I have the opportunity to interview J.J. Abrams or Chris Terrio just so I can tell them that, because I know that it was probably a daunting task, and I bet there was a bit of disappointment that they got from some of the reaction from the fandom, which is just always going to be like that now because of social networking. A movie like The Rise of Skywalker was never going to be something like Endgame. What Marvel did with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it doesn't, you just can't replicate that. They did a fantastic job, and Kevin Feige and Marvel and Disney did a fantastic job of creating 10 years of these stories and culminating them in these larger tales. Star Wars was never going to have that type of luxury. There's too much passion behind the fandom and the love of these characters. And, in too many opportunities because of social networking for every single Yahoo to express an opinion and thought that pops into their head, even though they should probably go and keep it to themselves. What Disney did with this trilogy is nothing short of astonishing, in my opinion. They did bring us something fresh and new, and that's what I want from Star Wars. Look, even though in The Mandalorian, season 2 finale, we got Luke igniting the green lightsaber, and it was a callback and brings us back to thinking about Return of the Jedi, that was a wholly new experience that we got with that. With these newer characters coming together, a different facet of Star Wars, the old meeting the new, it was fantastic. That's what I want. And the sequel trilogy, I thought, did a fantastic job of bringing us these great new characters and making 3 very different films, especially The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. I've got my options, man. If I want new Star Wars, and I was like, well, what do I want? Oh, what do I want? Do I just want to go on a fun adventure where every minute of this film is going to entertain me? I'm watching The Rise of Skywalker. Do I want to sit down and really absorb a film that's got a lot of depth to it, that it's shot beautifully, that was paced a little slower, but I can really just get into and absorb? And it's The Last Jedi. Thank you, Disney, for doing all that. The Rise of Skywalker also holds and will always hold a special place in my heart because it was one of the last movies so far that I'd seen. I saw Tenet in the theater, and the last movie pre-COVID that I saw, I said the word, was Onward. But, The Rise of Skywalker, in my opinion, is going to be very symbolic of the end of a particular point within American history and maybe global history that we won't know the ramifications of for a long, long time. Because after that movie came out, it was the last big blockbuster to be released, and everything changed after that. And I think that the same thing can ring true when it comes to Star Wars after the end of The Rise of Skywalker and the end of the Skywalker saga, and the same thing can ring true for our planet as a whole. And for that reason, I think that The Rise of Skywalker is going to have a very unique spot in cinema history and Star Wars history, even for people that didn't like it or just thought it was okay. I think that it is an amazing Star Wars film, and it's one of my favorite, if not currently my favorite Star Wars movie. And that's a tall order because I love Star Wars a lot, and I love The Empire Strikes Back a lot. But The Rise of Skywalker is a truly special, unique finale to this story that has brought me just an abundance of joy throughout the years, and I get excited every time that I watch it. And I'm so weird about it too because I don't like to sit down and watch it in pieces. When I watch The Rise of Skywalker, I want to watch the whole thing, and it's long and it's hard to do, and it's the same thing that happens with The Last Jedi because I need to carve out like 2.5 hours of my day to watch it, and I've got other things that I'm working on. But I try to make time because I really, if you haven't noticed, I love that movie. So happy 1 year, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Thank you, Daisy Ridley. Thank you, J.J. Abrams, and thank you, Chris Terrio, and thank you, Kathleen Kennedy, for providing this fan with an amazing piece of Star Wars lore, and I look forward to watching it, and being entertained by it for years to come. The Rise of Skywalker makes me worry less and not worry actually at all about having to wait until 2023 to see the next Star Wars film on the big screen because I'll always know that I have The Rise of Skywalker that I can go and watch. All right. Hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed it. Now I want to go watch. Now I have all the Star Wars I want to watch. I want to watch the season 2 finale again, and then I want to watch Return of the Jedi, and then I kind of want to watch Rebels. And then I also want to watch The Rise of Skywalker. So on top of that, I have to edit an audiobook, edit an actual book, and write another book. And I can't do all those at the same time. It should be like Watchmen. I wish I could just clone myself and I could do all these other things, right? It didn't really bode so well for for that dude, though, for those that are familiar with that story. All right, that's it. I'm going to wrap this up. Again, one more Merry Christmas to you, and I hope you enjoyed it. Go pick up Embark for you or a friend or a family member. For the sci-fi reader in your family, please go and support the show. I would greatly appreciate it. And I will talk to you again, real soon.
There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?
I have, and it's Obi-Wan Kenobi to go and make it official again.
The Force will be with you. Always.
My nerd world.